Hello, this is Dr. Feast Price, and I would like to continue on with week 7 by talking about therapeutic treatment approaches to family therapy. And in so doing, with the lectures that follow, I'd like to provide an overview of the therapeutic approaches to family therapy, and I'd also like to provide you with a detailed understanding of various therapeutic treatment modalities. So for both this week as well as next, we'll be really delving into the use of various treatment modalities in family therapy. One of the things we know is that as you consider the use of different treatment modalities, we know that most people are eclectic. And so while family therapists do not choose one particular treatment modality, they oftentimes borrow from various treatment modalities. And so as we go through the different lectures, I want you to think about those parts of the treatment approaches that you believe would mesh best with your skill set and your personality, and be mindful of those so that you can use them in your toolbox as it relates to working with various families. And so when you consider all of the different kinds of treatment approaches to family therapy, theories are far more alike than they are different. And so if you lay out all of the different therapeutic approaches to family therapy, you'll find that there's not a lot that differs one from another. However, there may be some nuances that might make one approach different from another. There may be certain skill sets or different ways of intervening that may be different. There might be different kinds of approaches that are used as well. And so just be mindful of those different types of ways of intervening that you find most appealing, and be sure and incorporate those in your ways of providing treatment to family members. So with all treatments in family therapy, the therapeutic approaches all attempt to clarify communication. We know based upon cybernetics that oftentimes the problems that exist within families has a lot to do with communication, ways of communicating. And there are these communication loops. There is a negative communication loop that has been sustained for an extended period of time. And so when people come in for treatment, it's to disrupt their communication loop through more positive kinds of ways of intervening, so that individuals are more aware of effective ways of communicating. So irrespective of the therapeutic approach to family therapy, all therapeutic approaches has a focus on clarifying communication and effectively impacting or enhancing communication styles within family members. Also, the primary goal is to overcome resistance. Oftentimes people within families hold certain positions that have been pre-established, and it's to assist persons to give up positions. Sometimes it's the positions of thinking as well as behaving that negatively impacts on family relations, and to help individuals to identify how, by giving up their position or status, they can best impact the family structure. But first and foremost, it's helping persons to understand what the problems are in hopes of assisting them with changing their position, or allowing their resistance to become diffused and to positively impact the family structure. There's also the attempt to rectify dysfunctional communication. So once you clarify what the communication patterns are, you want to help persons within the family to rectify dysfunctional communication and communicate in ways that are more effective and allows everyone within the family system to have their needs met and to be heard within the family system. So the relationship is always the focus of family therapy, the ways of relating to and interacting with other members of the family. is at the core of what is done in family therapy. And so, again, most family therapists are eclectic, so do pay attention to those types of treatment styles and modalities that are consistent with your personality and your style of working with other individuals, particularly family members. So, what we will focus on over this particular week, as well as that of next week, is looking at some of the therapeutic approaches to family therapy, and included are Bowen family therapy, experiential family therapy, behavioral as well as cognitive behavioral therapy, structural family therapy, and strategic family therapy. So, for starters, looking at Bowen family therapy, the important thing to note is that Bowen is one of the key founders of family therapy, and he comes from a psychoanalytic perspective. And so, when you think about psychoanalytic therapy and you reflect on what you learn in your theories of techniques in both techniques 1 and 2, we know that with psychoanalytic theory, it is long, it takes a long time to get to the core, and oftentimes they're dealing with issues that are not always in one's cognizant reality. So sometimes it's issues that have been repressed, and it might be issues that are deep within the family system or family structure that might have occurred from one generation to another. So with Bowen family therapy, the premise is that intergenerational relationships and the nature of repeating patterns are core or central to the family. And so most of the family's problems are generational or intergenerational in nature, and the problems have been transmitted from one generation to another, and families simply repeat some of those patterns of communicating and relating that have been transmitted from one generation to another. And so you have to ask yourself whether you believe this to be the case or not. Is it possible that when a family functions, that the way in which the husband and the wife function with each other and with their children is based upon how they were treated and raised as children within their family? And oftentimes you will find that there are intergenerational connections that exist, and that people really do repeat patterns. And so while we recognize that this is important, you have to decide to what extent you want to use this information to delve deep into some of the issues that are in the foreground or in the background rather than in the present, and how it impacts the existing functioning within the family. So for me as a therapist, I think it's important to understand where people get the messages from, the messages of what it means to be a mother, or what it means to be a father, or how they discipline children. It's important to help them to connect that this information that they execute in today's times are learned behavior, and to help them to understand that there are various ways of doing things and that they can make the decision to do things differently. But if you believe in Bowen therapy, and that is the primary therapeutic approach that you espouse to, along with that, there might be other tenets from Bowen therapy that you might want to use and facilitate when working with families. The other issue that's most relevant for Bowen family therapy is that the theory and therapy are the same. So there may be certain theoretical tenets, but you will not find it to be different from the therapeutic ways of doing things. So the ways of looking at families of origin, ways of understanding behaviors, and how it was transmitted from one generation to another, and ways of behaving. And so the theory and the therapy are one and the same. There's also a differentiation from family of origin. In order for the families to overcome some of the core issues that bring them to family therapy, while much of their behavior might be rooted in some of the intergenerational ways of behaving and repeating some of the patterns that they've learned from one generation to another. It's also important to help individuals to differentiate themselves from what they've been taught over the years and to do things differently, particularly if the new ways of doing things are more pro social and it brings about more homeostasis and more of a positive feedback loop within the family. Um, Uncontrolled anxiety results in family dysfunctionality, as well as triangulation is a key manifestation of uncontrolled anxiety. And triangulation really speaks to the fact that individuals within the family, if there's a husband, wife, and children, oftentimes, as an example, in order for the adults to deal with issues they may have in the family, they might project the problems onto the children. And so it involves scapegoating. So rather than dealing with the problems at hand, oftentimes there's a certain level of scapegoating that exists within the family members, of blaming other individuals within the family for some of the problems that exist. So there are specific kinds of treatment goals that exist in Bowen family therapy. And first and foremost, the individual or couple is the unit of treatment. And so you're intervening with the individual or the couple. It's not going back in for multiple generations to try and impact those individuals, but instead it's the persons that are presenting for treatment. And you do want to prevent triangulation from occurring. You want to bring about more productive ways of communicating that will limit the extent to which persons find a scapegoat within the family to project problems and issues, but yet deal with the problems that come up and arise within the family system. Another treatment goal for Bowen family therapy is to enhance the focus on cognitions rather than emotions. So rather than people being focused on how they're feeling, it's tell me what you're thinking. What are you thinking? What was going through your mind when something in particular happened? And here you can see a little bit of the cognitive behavioral bent, because if you understand the cognitions and help individuals to understand the cognitions and how it's not the behavior, the antecedent or whatever the issue was that precipitated the problem, but instead look at the way they think of the problem, make sense of it, some of the belief systems associated with the behaviors, and therein lies the problem rather than focused on the emotions, which are really a direct result of the person's thinking. So within Bowen therapy, there is the focus on cognitions, and also a treatment goal is to stop dysfunctional, repetitive, intergenerational patterns of relating. So bringing certain issues to the awareness of family members so that they can make choices to behave differently. So you want to give them skills to behave in situations that are different from the ways in which they're behaving. And there are times when the way people may behave in families, which has been transmitted from generation to generation, is more on an unconscious level. People do things and you might ask them, so why did you do that? Or explain your decision behind a behavior that occurred. And you'll find that the person will say, well, that's because that's how my parents raised me, or my parents did it to me, and so now I'm doing it to my family. And so there's no real conscious decision making, but instead it's more of an unconscious way of behaving because it's information that was transmitted from generation to generation. And the primary goal is to stop dysfunctional, repetitive, intergenerational patterns of relating and to define more pro-social ways of communicating that works within the best interest of all family members. So when you consider some of the techniques of Bowen, one of the things that was really important in Bowen therapy is the use of genograms. And what genograms are is it allows an individual or the therapist to look at multiple generations within the family. It may be one generation from the existing family unit or two generations, but typically you have the family unit and you go back with no more than two generations. And it's an opportunity for individuals to look at key factors that exist within the family and to identify some of the generational kinds of issues. So you're looking at the parents, the mother, father, the offsprings. And so you're asking the person as they draw the diagram depicting their two generations of families, what are some of the ways of communicating, what are some of the problems of relating, and how are those issues transmitted in today's times. And so it helps them to recognize some of the generational problems that exist and also to bring it more to their conscious level. Because a lot of times when people come in for therapy, they are not cognizant of some of the ways in which they behave or why they do some of the things that they do. And so through the genogram, it helps to connect the individual with some of the generational kinds of issues that have been handed down from one generation to another. There's also a technique called going home again. And in the technique of going home again, it allows the individual to go back home, and sometimes it's a physical going back to the home environment and re-experiencing the environment, paying particular attention to ways of communicating, ways of power and control. We talked about symmetrical and complementary kinds of communication. So it might be assisting the person when they do go home to recognize the ways in which the communication is healthy or unhealthy, whether it's symmetrical or complementary, whether or not they recognize centripetal or centrifugal kinds of ways of relating and communicating. And so going home again provides an opportunity for individuals to go back home in a physical sense to explore and understand some of the dynamics that exist within the home environment and how they contribute to the way in which individuals are functioning in present day time. Sometimes individuals are unable to go home again in a physical sense, so sometimes it might mean going home again from a cognitive perspective. And when this occurs, it allows the individuals to go back in time and remember what it was like within the family structure, ways of communicating, ways of being, and understand how those issues translate to the present day and time. Detriangulation is a very important aspect of the treatment process. And with detriangulation, we talked about what triangulation means, and that is when individuals are, when there are problems with two people within the family and they identify a third person as a scapegoat. And so the detriangulation that exists within a family oftentimes means that persons no longer use triangulation as a means of communicating. And specifically, your book identifies it as a process of being in contact with others and yet being emotionally separate. And so you are within the family, you're of the family, but you're not allowing yourself to be emotionally as involved or vested in some of the problems or ills that exist within the family. So it's a separation of yourself from the family system or the family dynamics. Person-to-person relationship is another one of the techniques that exist within Bowen therapy. And with person-to-person relationships, it is a process by which individuals are able to recognize some of the patterns of communicating, ways of resolving differences. Sometimes it's making amends, but what it really involves is individuals communicating with each individual rather than lumping everyone in the family together. It allows the individual to see people within the family as individuals, to focus on issues and problems with each individual one at a time rather than to lump all individuals together, and recognize the problems on an individual basis. So two family members relate personally to each other, about each other. That is, they don't talk about others, they don't do any triangulating, and they don't talk about impersonal issues. So they keep the focus on the individuals, on themselves, rather than focusing on other people within the family dynamics. Also, among the techniques that are specific to Bowen's family therapy or differentiation of self. And with differentiation of self, it has to do with the degree to which a person is able to distinguish between the subjective feeling process and the more objective intellectual thinking process. So it's, again, another way of having a healthy emotional detachment from the family members. It's also the ability to maintain objectivity by separating your affect and cognitions from that of the family. And so you have some families that are very enmeshed, where everyone, the actions of one individual directly impacts the actions of another. It's these families that are so close that you can't separate one individual from another. And that's really like a polar opposite of the differentiation of self, is the enmeshment. Fusion is a failure to differentiate, which results in fusion. And so you could have these enmeshed families where everyone is fused together. But one of the techniques of Bowen is to help family members to become more differentiated, a separation of self from the family, detaching yourself emotionally as well as cognitively, so that some of the problems that exist within the family doesn't also become your problems as well. And another important technique of Bowen family therapy is asking questions. So key to all of what is done by Bowen is asking questions. It's actually deemed to be the magic bullet, and it's the main tool of a Bowen therapist. And so basically they're asking key questions about what disturbs the equilibrium of the family, what are some of the things that have been good about the family, what are some of those things that are the strengths of the family, what are some of the problems. And so really to get to the core, to understand the family, asking questions is to be the paramount and the magic bullet of Bowen family therapy. And Bowen believes that to bring the unconscious into a more conscious light helps the individual to bring about more positive changes in their lives. And so in asking questions is to bring information to the forefront. You'll use genograms to do that, and your book has an excellent pictorial demonstration of the genogram. There's the technique of going home to understand what the dynamics are, triangulation, so that people that might have been in an infused family or an enmeshed family, individuals become more detriangulated and more independent when there are relationships with others, that it's focused on the specific individual rather than on other family members. And there's also the importance of the person or persons within the family differentiating themselves from others. So it's like you can love the family members, you can feel compassion for them, but it's the process by which you do not allow your thoughts and feelings and behaviors to be enmeshed with that of other family members. And so Bowen believes that the role of the family therapist is to serve as a differentiated person who acts as a coach or teacher and concentrates on boundary differentiation issues. So, at its very core, you're helping to facilitate people defining boundaries and becoming less diffused and more differentiated. From a cultural context, I can see that I could see a lot of benefit in Bowen family therapy, but when you think about some individuals that might come from collectivist cultures where the cultural values and mores are more interconnected, where there's less of a likelihood that people do things from an individualistic perspective, but more from a collectivist perspective, I can see where Bowen's way of doing things and Bowen's way of encouraging persons to differentiate themselves from the family and becoming less diffuse and less fused can become problematic. But I think what is key here is that for individuals to realize that they can be in loving relationships with their family without allowing some of the family drama or the family nuances to negatively impact them. And so while some of the boundaries may be physical in nature, sometimes the boundaries actually are more cognizant or cognitions. It might be the way in which they allow family members to negatively impact on their thoughts or feelings. And so sometimes it's helping individuals to reconceptualize how they view their family and how they give other family members control over their thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And so, again, the role of the therapist when using Bowen family therapy is to assist individuals within the family to become more differentiated. And as a therapist, you're acting as a coach and a teacher by helping people to figure out how best to establish boundaries and to differentiate themselves from family so that they can remain in a healthy place within the family. So there are different process and outcome issues regarding Bowen therapy. Bowen family therapy helps family members to become more differentiated and fluid in their interactions. So while they might preserve their family relations, because of the differentiation that exists, they become more fluid in their interactions. So they can be with the family without being fused or enmeshed with some of the family dynamics. And so it gives the individual more control rather than functioning in ways that are more unconscious in nature and buying into some of the generational kinds of ways of behaving and functioning within the family system. Also, one of the process and outcome issues related to Bowen family therapy is to assist family members to be more cognitive and understanding of intergenerational patterns. So again, that's bringing the unconscious into a conscious level of understanding the ways of behaving that have been transmitted from one generation to another, and empowering individuals with the tools and skills needed to become more differentiated and less fused with family members, and having more of a fluid way of interacting and behaving that would be more pro-social and more positive for their way of thinking, feeling, and behaving. So when you compare Bowen therapy to other kinds of therapeutic approaches, one factor that's really specific to Bowen therapy is that there's more emphasis on the past and less on the present. And so some people that consider Bowen therapy, they believe that because it's so past oriented, it gives less attention to the present and existing problem. And I believe that the past is only as relevant as it is to the present. And so if individuals are experiencing problems in current times, you do want to help them to recognize where the origin of the problems are, and based upon that understanding, allowing the individual to move forward. Also, with Bowen therapy, in comparison to other therapeutic approaches, it's difficult to research because a lot of the therapeutic treatment modalities of Bowen is more cognitive in nature. So it's impacting the way people think or feel, and oftentimes you're far less able to quantify this kind of information. And so it's because of it, it's more difficult to research, to quantify. And so at best, what you get is subjective information that's qualitative in nature, and it's just much harder to arrive at a better understanding because the information is more qualitative. There's also a high degree of investment of time and money for clients. And so when you recognize that there is managed care, persons are only limited to a certain number of sessions. And once those sessions are up, the insurance company is less likely to provide the resources, or family members have to come out of pocket. So when you recognize the fact that with managed care and the socioeconomic status of most of your clients, you know that you are only limited, you're very limited in the amount of treatment that is available. And if you're using Bowen therapy and you're going back through generations and you're recognizing through genograms and other kinds of techniques and modalities some of the problems that exist in some of the generational issues, then it impedes and negatively impact how much you're able to accomplish. So there's a high degree of investment of time. The positive changes that come about through Bowen therapy requires more time and more resources. And because of that, it is believed to be one of those therapeutic approaches that is most difficult to utilize when working with families. But as I mentioned to you before, it's important to recognize the strengths of the Bowen's therapeutic approach, identify those tools and techniques that are most relevant to you, and add them to your toolbox. So while you may not become a Bowen therapist, you can at least use some of those therapeutic treatment modalities that are most effective. And I can think of a number of things that would be beneficial for you and are beneficial to me in my way of working with couples and families. And it is important to recognize where do they learn some of the behavior and how does that behavior impact their behavior currently, to figure out ways to become more differentiated rather than fused with family members, and to help people to become more cognizant of behavior, of the way in which they think and feel, rather than feeling the way they feel because that's what has been handed down within the family system, or that's how other family members feel. And so equipping them with information that will empower them to make better decisions about their ways of behaving and thinking and feeling, I think is really important. And those are some of the things that I take with me from Bowen therapy that allows me to be effective when working with family members. So in a nutshell, that's Bowen family therapy. I realized that Bowen therapy, there's a lot more information that you can draw upon, which is included in your text. But for the purpose of this lecture, I wanted to give you an overview of Bowen therapy to help you understand this therapeutic approach, some of the therapeutic techniques and tools that are used, the ways in which you function as a therapist, and allow this information to inform how you can intervene with families that are experiencing difficulties. So I hope you found this information helpful, and I hope that you found some tools that you can incorporate in your toolbox when working with family members. Thank you for your attention.